Hi, everyone. It looks like we've got only 5 on right now. And so let's give it just a few more minutes. And while we're doing that, I'm setting up another person who's watching in another room. So it's just going to take me a few minutes. Erin, I can see the top of your head a little bit. We're expecting 15, so let's just give it a few minutes. Rebecca, you should be signed up as a co-host. You are? Okay, perfect. So let's just, if you can give me just a few more minutes to get a participant signed up on another computer, I'll be ready in just a moment. Welcome to sit in there with me. I'll have you watch from this computer. This is fun. Yeah, what would you have sound? You live here in town? Yeah. Well, no, I live down on the student. And what we can do for future ones, if you'd like, if you wanted to come by and pick up one of these computers at us now, the day of the class, and then drop it back off on stage, you're welcome to do that. Okay. But I might do now this one, do it right from here. It's already. Really? The obvious thing first, we'll have a nice big screen. That's actually nope, it's not. It's yeah, I'll think of it here in a minute. But what we're doing is I'm going to do it like first and because he has beautiful defensible iron space around him. And
Lady on.
wanted to heal everyone. Yeah. Grab my personal ID. I'm just so glad you decided just to come to the office though, other than just, you know, not join. Yeah. So much rather here. It's gonna say instead of your name, it's gonna say my name. Okay. And I'm gonna try to change that. Recording in progress. And your name is Karen?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think you're set. I am gonna mute you.
Okay.
There's no double. Yeah. Yeah, but you'll still be able to hear. It's just that they won't hear the double sound. Is it doing it right now? If you notice something odd with that computer, you see how I can hear myself through both of them now. So I'm gonna shut this and see if that helps.
You see that we're like twinning here, Tyanne? Black, blue, white.
Oh, you're right, we are.
Didn't even plan it.
Nope. Karen, do we have the right volume for you right there? Perfect. So Karen had an issue with her own home computer, so she came running to the office to come join us here. So I had to quickly set up a computer. So thanks for being patient with me. And it looks like we've got 9 on the call right now. So I do have it recording. You're welcome to ask questions and do all that, but it is recording. I don't know yet what we'll do with the recording, but at least we'll have it. And I'm going to try a set of headphones to see if we can't stop that. If you can hear that double to my voice, you can't. It's just me that can hear myself on the other computer, but I'm going to try a set of headphones and see if that helps. Well, no, I'm not. I don't have a set of headphones for this computer. Okay, well, Rebecca, it's 7:05. Should we start? Okay, I'll start with an introduction really quick. Hi, my name is Tyanne Roland. I'm the extension educator in Adams County. And the reason that this class came about was that I started asking some of the groups, the agricultural groups around the area, what they would like to learn. And they said, we'd really like you to teach our neighbors some things about our lives and what it's like to be in farming and ranching and some of the things that we go through. And so we are giving you pieces of that in addition of allowing you to gain some more information for your own properties in your own homes. And if you do have acreages for that as well. So Rebecca Mills is also on the Zoom, and she is the extension educator in Gem and Boise County. And Rebecca, I'll let you say a little bit more about yourself there.
Thanks. Do you want me to jump into my presentation after I introduce myself, or do you have more announcements?
No, you can go ahead and jump into your presentation when you're
Okay. I
done.
have a couple introduction slides about me in my presentation, so that's part of why I asked. So yes, as mentioned, I live down in Horseshoe Bend, but I am the educator in Emmett, and I cover both Gem and Boise counties. And my focus area down here is livestock, small farms, and 4-H youth development. So we teach a class down in the Treasure Valley once a year that I'm part of called Living on the Land. And some of the content I'll cover tonight is part of what we talk about in that class, which is helping people who own small acreages to, it's a 15-week course and it covers everything from water rights to building fences to identifying weeds and pests of all kinds, including large animals to small microscopic bugs in your garden. So it's a pretty in-depth course, and it's really fun to be able to connect with people who are living on small acreages. I live on a small acreage myself. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But my focus tonight is to talk about livestock ownership on small acreage, whether that's you. And I kind of prepared in mind thinking about people who are owning animals, livestock on small acreages, but also your neighbors and what they might be doing as well. So we have a pretty small group, and I really like to connect with my class when I teach. So if you're able to have your camera on, at least for a second, so that I can see that you are more than white letters on a screen, that would be great. My leadoff question in this class, is, you can put it in the chat, is if you could own any kind of animal, livestock or otherwise, what animal would it be? And I get some pretty interesting answers when I ask this question, usually everything from monkeys to yaks and all things that have a wallaby or a skunk. Nice. I've heard that you can descent skunks and they're kind of like cats.
With a little bit more personality. Yeah, they're spunky. Unfortunately, my veterinarian will not be my veterinarian for a skunk because they carry rabies in utero.
Oh.
So it's too much of a risk. So it'd be hard to find a veterinarian.
Aaron wants a donkey. Nice. Our neighbor down the road here has a mini donkey. So cute. And then there's a donkey on the way to on my commute. It just had a baby donkey. And if they could get any cuter. Mini Highlander cow, another good one. My dad raises mini Herefords. They're adorable. They're very cute. So if you could own any kind of animal, what would it be? And I'll get my presentation queued up here. So interesting. Once I share my screen, I can't always see you anymore, just so you know. But I will do my best to stay in tabs with, there we go. Ooh, Cooney pigs. Yeah, I know some people up in Garden Valley that have some of those too. Another interesting critter. Okay, I'm going to jump right in here. This first, I know Tyanne mentioned that there's a teaching evaluation she sent out an email just before class with my handouts and a link to a teaching evaluation. And this, it's going to look like 3 presentations because it's kind of 3 presentations that I'm mashing all together here for you tonight. But so for the teaching evaluation, sorry, I just looked out my window and I don't know, I got to stop sharing for a second. I got to see if you can see this. This is what, and I'm going to have to stop my background. This is what living on a small acreage is like when your neighbors, AKA my parents, when their calves don't respect the hot fence. Can you see that? Those are calves that will soon be weaned from their mothers, like in 2 days, that are eating my front yard. Have a talk with my father. Okay, back to the point. Sorry. That's one of the minis, the mini Hereford out there. Pesky critter. All right, are we back to the slides now? Okay. So this presentation, I want to go through some of the pros and cons of different types of owning different types of animals. You can see across the top there, those are all animals that we've owned. My husband and I have had small acreage for a majority of our married life. We've been married for 17 and a half years, and we've tried just about everything. From orphan baby calves to chickens and baby lambs and baby goats and baby pigs and horses. And now we have a passel of cows and some neighbor cows on the front yard. But this is an overview of our property here in Horseshoe Bend. We have our little homestead piece, I guess you'd call it, is just under 9 acres. Dry land. No irrigation except for right around our house, where it's the only green spot. And this picture is a little bit old. We have a few more buildings than that now. But so we operate in praying for rain often to try to have grass for the cows to eat. We also own, so our homestead property is kind of over here to the on the left side of the screen. But we also own 160 acres up higher in the hills, and that's where our cows hang out the majority of the year. It's pretty amazing that cattle can turn brush skeleton weed into tasty beef. It's kind of a miracle. Thankful for the ruminant digestive system that allows them to do that. But this is just the perspective of me being a small acreage landowner myself and having neighbors and raising animals and living the rural life. This is my family, my indoor family, I guess you could say. My husband in the center there, he's a leather worker, so that's him in his saddle shop, and we have a couple cats and a couple dogs, and just living the life. So when we think about introducing animals to our small acreages or living rurally, a lot of times that's the first thing that people want to do is they want to get animals because now we have a little room, right? And so some things generally to consider if you're wanting to get animals on your property, or if your neighbors have animals, these are some of the things that might be part of that equation. So you want to think about how much space is needed, what the end goal is for that product. Apologize, my deaf blind dog is barking at the door. The choice of working from home. You also want to think about the startup or maintenance expenses of those animals, how you're going to market the end product of those animals, labor and equipment required, the care needed, and how it's going to integrate with any other enterprises you might have going on. So there are 6 species of animals that I'm going to talk through today. And this presentation isn't super engaging, I'll tell you that, just because it's kind of a laundry list. But I wanted you to have this information just to kind of keep in your back pocket to consider when you're thinking about adding different types of animals to your property. So we're going to start kind of smallest to largest. We're going to talk about rabbits. So rabbits can be raised for meat, fiber, breeding stock, or as pets. They're really pretty inexpensive and easy to get into, and they don't take a lot of space. Their housing and land needs are very minimal. A pro, and could also be a con with rabbits, is they're highly reproductive. You could, if you were raising rabbits very intentionally have 50 to 75 rabbits in a year, which is more than any other critter you could probably have. Meat rabbits also they're a fast turnaround time. So if you were getting into it just to produce meat, you could have your finished product in a really short turnaround time, 1 month for gestation, harvest in 10 to 12 weeks. So there's also a growing demand for breeding and pet rabbits. So that's one thing to assess in your area, though. That's something to think about. Where am I going to sell my breeding rabbits, or who is going to buy pet rabbits from me if I end up with 50 of them on accident or on purpose? So just like mentioned, it could be difficult depending on your area to find that steady market if you're raising meat, or even if you're raising them for pet rabbits. And there's also the challenge of who's going to do the processing for you. These are all things to think about before you buy your first rabbit, or your first 2 rabbits that you don't know are a male and female and accidentally have a whole kit of rabbits by surprise. If you're going to think about raising rabbits for their pelts, for their fiber, it's going to be really important that you also understand the market for that and understand how to harvest that and how to handle that, so that you aren't accidentally or inadvertently and damaging your products just because you might not know as much as you need to know. Rabbits are also vulnerable to predators, and they'll need to be protected. Poultry will move up a little bit. So I often tell people that chickens are a gateway livestock. And by that, I mean that people think, oh, well, I have a little acreage, we can have chickens. And then they're like, oh, well, we got a little more room, we could get ducks, and we could have a goat, and then we could have a cow, and then we could, so they're a gateway livestock. They just get you into it and they suck you in. I really enjoy raising chickens. I don't have a very extensive flock, but that's what I got for my birthday this year, was baby chicks, because I'm kind of into chickens, I guess. So raising chickens can be inexpensive to get into, and there's not a lot of space required depending on how you choose to raise them. The housing can be minimal. There's lots of benefits that chickens can provide to your soil, and they can help with parasite control in your pastures or around your property. As just thinking about ticks and snakes and bugs, grasshoppers. My chickens got real sick of grasshoppers this summer at my house. So if you have access to irrigated pasture, you can have your poultry on pasture for part of their diet. And for meat birds, anywhere from 8 to 24 weeks, start to finish, is a pretty quick turnaround again. And then of course, a lot of people like to eat eggs and poultry meat, so finding the customers can be relatively easy. Some cons about poultry production: could be a lot of labor involved. If you're raising meat birds on pasture, you're moving them daily, but it's also a short term, right? So same with the eggs, you're needing to gather them daily, make sure that you're processing them correctly and safely for your customers. And I really like the last one. Everybody loves poultry. That was a pro, right? Well, also do bears and raccoons, skunks, weasels, coyotes, dogs, hawks, owls. So I had a trauma in my poultry house just 2 nights ago, and I lost my favorite chicken. Why does it always have to be the favorites that end up? So I made up this really cool story that she was protecting everybody else, and that's why she went first, because she was so cool. But it was still sad. All right, moving up in size. Go to goats. Raising goats for meat, milk, fiber, breeding stock, or pets. So goats, it's really common for goats to have multiple babies, and so you can easily double your herd pretty quickly and grow your herd. So there's also a fast turnaround time relatively for large livestock for the 5 months gestation, and the kids, the baby goats, can reach market weight in 6 to 8 months. And it doesn't take a lot, but more than just their mother's milk and then good pasture. So that's some low input, some low costs involved there. And depending on where you're at, there could be a market for having goat milk products in your area. That could be another enterprise that can be a companion to raising goats. I've wanted for a while to raise a breed of goats called Pygora goats, and they're a pygmy goat crossed with an Angora goat. So they have a really pretty pelt, and it can be used for fiber work, crochet and things. But you don't eat them, you just shear them. So because I'm kind of an animal lover, I have a hard time eating my animals sometimes. And so I think that would be, and they're just like the breed characteristic is that they're as long as they are tall, and that's not very big. So how cute would Pygora goats be? And something that directly marketed to hand spinners, which there's a fair amount of those in Idaho. Some cons to goats. Excellent fencing required. If you have any neighbors that have goats, you might notice their goats on your yard, like my neighbor cows, if the fences aren't great, or you notice that they stay put really well because the fences are good. Taller woven wire or panels reinforced with electric is best, to have electric mesh even, because goats just will push on those fences. And they also like to climb things, and they're just kind of pesky that way. If you're raising dairy goats, you need to make sure that your facilities are set up to make sure that they're clean and they can meet any requirements for selling your milk products. And just like the fiber cells with rabbits, being knowledgeable about your product, about how to care for the fiber, how to harvest the fiber is essential for you to be successful in that. Again, vulnerable to predators. A lot of times people will have a guard dog or a guard donkey. There you go. You could have a donkey to protect your goats. And because they're pretty susceptible to that. Sheep are a lot like goats as far as the pros and the cons. You could, depending on your setup, you could have different types of sheep. There are hair sheep and wool sheep and meat sheep. So I did a class at a lady's place that she had Katahdin sheep, and they were a hair sheep, so she didn't have to shear them. And that's a pretty major consideration to make, because shearing takes a lot of labor and time. And so depending on what you want out of your end product, the different breeds of sheep, it'd be good to know about the different breeds and what they're good for. And then the cons, of course, good fencing. Again, sheep are a little different with the electrical fence, just because of their wool. They sometimes can get through the electrical fence even easier than a goat, because their wool kind of protects them from that electric charge. And they're also vulnerable to predators, much like the goats. Talk about pigs for a second. So pigs being raised for meat or breeding stock. Pigs are also pretty prolific. You could, this is something that it says gestation 4 months, but I learned in 4-H as a kid that gestation of a pig is 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. And so you could do a couple litters a year with your pigs. Pigs are pretty unique in that they can eat lots of different things. So they're omnivores, so they can eat, they can kind of clean up around the farm for you. So if you have vegetables in your garden that don't make it through, or leftovers from your household waste, some of the things that those pigs just will gobble right up. If you have a dairy part of your operation, like say you have a couple milk goats and you can't keep up with all the milk they're producing, well, the pigs could eat that too. So they also can be raised on pasture. So that's kind of a unique thing as well. Some people are making a pretty popular niche market with pasture pork these days. And so that's a way to diversify if you have the area to be able to have pigs outside. Another great picture here of pigs on pasture. So pigs, one of the big cons with pigs is that they don't regulate their body temperature very well. They can chill and overheat very easily. And so shelter is required year round. And it's really, they need to be bedded warm in the winter and have good shade and access to water for cooling themselves in the summertime. They, depending on the breed, some of the heritage breeds, they aren't made to grow, have to have high powered feed for optimal growth. So you'd want to do your research on which breed of pig you want to bring into your home. Well, not into your home, but onto your property. Some people bring them into their homes, I suppose. So sturdy equipment is also required, and because they're vigorous rooters and diggers. So if you have a pasture that's got lots of roots and bad weeds and things, turn the pigs out and they'll clean it up for you. If you have a good pasture that you don't want that to happen, then be cautious about how long you have your pigs out in those nice pastures. And the largest that we'll talk about today, cattle. Of course, there are lots of people raising cattle on pasture alone these days, grass-fed beef, grass-fed, grass-finished. And it's, we want to talk about dairy as well. So with good genetics, high quality pasture, dairy cows can produce just as an excellent milk quantity with little or no grain supplementation. So there's a good market for these products in our area, I think. Be interesting to see how it is up in Adams County or even in more rural places. We have access down here closer to the Treasure Valley to the farmers markets and things. And even with the internet, I mean, people are marketing niche products all the time, very successfully. Thing about raising cattle is that, yes, barbed wire fencing works, but they can also be trained to one-strand electric fences for interior pastures. You know, you might have to have some pretty strong exterior fences, but when you're handling cattle with low stress management practices, it's possible to break them to a one-strand of hot fence, which is pretty cool. They are hardy and self-sufficient animals for sure. Somebody told me one time they're like a walking refrigerator. It's just meat walking around out there in your pasture. We have 10 cows and they are just part of my family. We love our cows. So cows are slow. They have a slow turnaround time. Their gestation is long. That number is incorrect. I fixed it a couple different times. They have a 9-month gestation. And most of the time they have singles. Every once in a while there will be twins, but the likelihood that one of the twins will survive or that the mom will accept both twins is pretty low. And depending on how you're finishing them, a lot of times in a feedlot situation where they're pushed heavy with grain and high-powered feed, they're usually harvested between 18 to 24 months, depending on if you're grass finishing them at home. Some of the grass finished products take more than 2 years, but most of the time people are finished before the 30-month age range, just because the animal starts to mature and their meat and their bone structure changes the older they get, and the meat quality might decrease at that. Of course, you need more land for cattle, just they require more space, just because they're a larger animal. It's really interesting, the people that are raising mini Herefords, mini Highlanders, Aberdeen Angus, trying to raise more practical sized cattle on smaller acreages. It's pretty inventive. What's the word I'm thinking of? Ingenious, that might be the word. All right, so to kind of wrap up about the pros and cons of different species when you're evaluating livestock enterprises. So a free animal is never free. I want you to think about that. I had a lady in a class one time that says, oh, I happened upon this ad that said free goats. And so I ended up with 12 goats, and then she had 30 goats. And then of course, nothing is free. So you want a low startup cost initially relative to the ability to generate income. So even though you might not be in living the small acreage life or living in a rural area to make money, to make your living off your property, it's still a good idea that that your property just doesn't become a money pit. And the way that you think about that, if you have a low startup cost, can this generate income? Even if that doesn't matter to you, it probably makes a difference to your budget for you not to just pour money into something all the time. So think about the costs involved and think about your time and labor resources. Are you going to be home all the time to milk that cow or that goat? Do you have kids that will get excited about collecting eggs every day? Do you have do you have the space to process the animals? Are you going to learn how to shear a sheep? Are you going to hire somebody to come and breed your cattle for you? All of those things are things to consider with the different enterprises that you choose. And so you want those to kind of mesh together. And I like of course, if you're raising eggs, you're raising chickens, whatever you're raising, wool, fiber, meat, is there a market for it in your area? Are you going to have to ship it? How does shipping work? Where is it going to be harvested? All those things. Profitable may or may not be a priority, but it's kind of a cherry on top. And I like the last one. Choose animals that you like being around. If you are terrified of horses, don't get a horse. If you are scared by small flying creatures, don't get chickens. If you are entertained by animals that have a lot of personality, maybe you need a goat or a mini donkey or an alpaca. But that's part of the thing about being with animals is they provide a lot of warm fuzzies for me anyway, because I like being around them. And so that's something to consider in raising livestock. Are there any questions about the things that I just shared, the different animal species? And you can unmute. I welcome you to unmute.
Yeah, Rebecca, is looking at different breeds than the typical breeds. Have you noticed that happening more often?
I think there's some of that happening because everybody, I'm gonna put my virtual background back on. I think trying to find the niche is something that people are trying to do more and more now, particularly on a small scale. If you can have a really unique market and somebody drives by your property and says, what is that? Is that a miniature Highlander cow? And they stop and start up a conversation. All of a sudden you have a customer out of the gig, and you can have an opportunity to talk about something unique. It can also kind of back you into a corner sometimes. So you want to do some research of, is there other people? Are there other people that are doing that in your area? Is it so specialized that you're going to have a hard time breeding for that? Are you going to have to be totally self-contained as far as having your own sire and dam, like be owning a bull or owning a buck? Those are things to consider too.
My parents are surrounded by yaks.
Oh.
And yaks are not an easy species, kind of like buffalo.
Right.
In personality. They can be somewhat dangerous, but there's actually 2 different breeders that have surrounded my parents with yaks.
Wow. Well, and one of the things you got to think about too with especially species is if something were to happen, is there a vet qualified to help you? Like exactly. That's not a typical vet school species, I wouldn't think. Not America anyway.
No.
Okay, I'm going to jump right into this next thing, and this is more or less a reference to that. You have a handout about this, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking through it because it's more something that you just have to take the time to research for your own situation, and that is space needed. So we talked about pros and cons, but this handout goes through the different species: cattle, poultry, sheep and goats, swine, and rabbits, and goes through some things to consider of how much shelter space you might need and how much outdoor space you might need. So it's really something that there's not a lot of value to talking about each thing individually, not knowing your situation and what you might want to do, but it is a valuable resource. And the other part to this is a concept called body condition scoring. And this is things that my husband's outside the window. So these are things to consider when owning animals, and these are things to consider when being around animals if you've not been around animals before. So body condition scoring is a tool used to gauge the health of livestock, and it's about understanding and noticing fat cover on the skeletal structure. So if an animal is carrying excess fat, that could be bad for its health. If it's not carrying enough fat, that could also be bad for its health. So a lot of times, when like my coworker, she lives down in Caldwell, and she has been in a typically rural area, but there are more and more housing developments coming in around where she lives. And she has a horse that's like, I don't know, 23 years old or something. And her horse, because it's old, has a hard time keeping weight on. And it's a condition that horse just is. It's just the way it is, but it's happy, it's healthy, it's just thin. And every so often they'll get a visit from the police officer, the local sheriff, that one of the neighbors has called in and said, your horse is too skinny, nobody's feeding this horse. And so they'll come out and say, I see your horse is still skinny. And she'll say, yep. And he says, how old is it this year? Oh, 23, and they have a conversation, because the sheriff understands and the livestock owner understands, but the neighbor doesn't necessarily understand it. So this is something, yes, there are animals that are too thin in the world, and there are animals that are being mistreated. And there are also animals that's their natural state. And there are also things as an animal owner that you can use this as a tool to help you manage your herd or your flock, whatever it might be. So body condition scoring, raising livestock, you just want to observe and evaluate. And it can happen, it can affect your management. So if you start to see your animals are getting thinner, it might clue you into, well, maybe they have some parasites internally. And so maybe I need to worm them, which would affect how well they're handling their feed. Maybe it's something I need to work on in my nutrition program. And this is an example. So the places that are often evaluated for to see if an animal's condition, across the back, like you can see the backbone, the tail head, which is right where the tail comes out of the body there. And then we start looking at the hip bones, so the hooks and the pins. And right in the ribs is another pretty obvious place. And then in the brisket, so the front of the animal. And of course, chickens don't have briskets, but I have in this handout an example of what different body condition scoring looks like for different animals. So if you have chickens, it's a good idea to handle your chickens every so often, pick them up and see, are they carrying weight? Or do they, because they look fluffy all the time, most of the likely. So when they're under conditioned, you might not be able to tell unless you're handling them. And so there's a scale for poultry, a scale for cattle, and sheep and goats, pigs, cute little pig butts, and horses in this handout. And it's just something for your information, something for you to use with your own livestock, something for you to be aware of, to look at other people's livestock and understand that there's management involved in that, there's animal health involved in that, there's sometimes it just is the way it is, some animals. And thinking about, so the cattle one particularly, a lot of people there's a different scale for dairy cattle than there is for beef cattle. And the dairy cattle, they're designed genetically to not carry much cover on their skeletal structure, to not have much fat, to not have much meat, muscle mass, because their body is designed to put all of the energy into making milk. And so a scale of 1 to if there was a beef cow or a dairy cow that looked like number 9 down here on the bottom right, that would be awful. But yet a dairy cow that looks like up here between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, that's probably closer to what. So the dairy scale is shifted to reflect that dairy cattle aren't supposed to carry all that muscle mass. So that's a handout you can kind of digest on your own terms. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, I'm going to switch gears again to something that I call the basics of animal husbandry. I'm going to get my presentation up. And I recently published a bulletin with the university, and that was something that Tyanne also sent out. And so the bulletin kind of walks through the same kind of things that I'm going to walk through in my presentation here. I have to pull up a YouTube video. Hold on. I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself. Having too many windows open at the same time. All right. So animal husbandry, this topic is, I don't know, kind of passionate about the basics of animal husbandry, and this presentation and some of the classes that we were putting together down in the Treasure Valley are, which we could probably easily replicate up in your area. Or every time I say that, I realize that I haven't asked you where you're all from. So if you want to put that in the chat, that might be helpful to me, so I won't keep assuming where I think you live. So animal husbandry, Encyclopedia Britannica definition is controlled cultivation, management, and production of domestic animals, including improvement of the qualities considered desirable by humans by means of breeding. So caring for these animals and cultivating them, breeding them for the things that we appreciate, food, fur, sport, pleasure, research. So I have this this YouTube video, and I want you to watch, well, just follow the directions, I guess, from what it tells you to do after we get our Disney commercial here.
Who are you? You look vaguely familiar.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
Okay, I'm going to pause right there. Did anybody see the gorilla? I can't see you anymore. Did anybody see the gorilla? If you saw the gorilla, put it in the chat.
This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is copyrighted.
Okay. Did anybody see the gorilla the first time? Aaron says no. I didn't see it the first time I watched it, and I swear it's the same video. They really just literally rewind it, and the gorilla is there. If you're not watching the white people passing the things, you can see him. Like even this time, I knew the gorilla was there, and I was focused on the white shirts passing the ball, and I almost missed him. It's pretty amazing. So the whole point of me sharing that is that the first tip that I have about caring for livestock is about the power of observation. And how important it is to just be observant. If you own, I mean, even if you have children, or you own animals, or you just in your daily life, being observant is a tool, a very useful tool. And when you're being observant with livestock, it's about being observant and knowing the signs of a healthy animal. So practicing the skill of observation can help you to notice small changes that happen in your animals. So if you spend a little bit of time with your animals every day, you're going to notice if things change, or you're going to notice if they've not eating as well, or if they've stopped drinking, or you're going to notice when they have a booger in their nose that they didn't have the day before, and or if they're struggling to breathe, or if their breathing's changed. The signs of a healthy animal. What are they? Well, a healthy animal will move freely. It'll be wandering about. It'll be resting appropriately. It won't like be all laid out with its feet up in the air. Well, fat cows do that sometimes on purpose. I hate it because I'm always like, are you dead? And then I'll like poke them or yell at them until they wake up. And then they think that I'm the rude one. But I think it's rude that they look like they were dead and they were just sleeping. So a healthy animal is eliminating their pooping and peeing when they're supposed to, and it looks appropriate. You can learn a lot about an animal by watching its waste. It sounds kind of gross, but it's true. And knowing what normal should look like helps you to notice when things change. So it's pretty normal for a dairy cow to have really loose stool. It's pretty normal for a rabbit to not have loose stool, right? So knowing what's normal so that you can notice these changes. It's normal, it's a sign of a healthy animal for them to eat regularly and to drink regularly. It's normal for them to breathe freely. And the things that you can see when do you observe this? Well, you can observe when you're feeding them every day. Just take a little extra time to hang out with your animals, and they will teach you. They will teach you how to care for them. They will teach you what they need if you will take the time to be observant and kind of notice the differences. Tip number 2 for basics of animal husbandry, caring for animals. Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So you might spend $1 preventing the problem. You might spend $10 correcting the problem. You might spend $100 dealing with the failure of not doing either of those things. So it's about preventing disease and so you know what a healthy animal looks like. How are you going to keep your healthy animals healthy? You want to make sure they have proper nutrition. That's just like us. When our immune system gets low, when we're not eating well, those are things that are going to make it easier for us to get sick. So you want to make sure animals have proper nutrition. You want to make sure they have good foot care, which is really interesting. You would think, what does foot care have to do with keeping a healthy animal healthy? Well, if your animal has poor feet, like if you need to trim their hooves, or like think about a horse that hasn't been trimmed in a long time, so they can't walk very well, right? So if they can't walk, they can't graze, or they can't get to the feed bunk, or they can't get to the water trough. And so foot care is actually a pretty important component of keeping your healthy animals healthy. Parasite control, it will be different for every species. So you'll want to learn about what parasites may impact the species that you have. So your Tyanne's parents' neighbors with yaks, I don't know what kind of things impact yaks, but if I owned yaks, I would want to know so that I could prevent it or control it should they show up. Vaccinations are another really important thing. Are there things that your animals that are regulated by law that your animals must have? Are there vaccinations that will help you meet your goals? Making sure that you're safe for yourself, safe for the other animals in the area. What is it that's being impacted for? Is there anything that wildlife is bringing in that you can prevent through a vaccination? Vaccinations are things that you would want to consult with your veterinarian about and do some research on for your livestock. The third tip about basics of animal husbandry, keeping things clean and safe. So I'm going to talk a little more depth about biosecurity, but so I'll just briefly touch on this in this slide. But thinking about poop, when you introduce livestock or animals to your property, you introduce contaminants and bacteria and all kinds of things. And so things to be thoughtful of are how that's interacting in your environment. Are you as a human transferring germs around? Are you cross-contaminating things by your use of buildings, tools, or equipment? And what's happening with water and soil in your environment? And what are you doing with all the poo? As soon as you bring animals into your world, then you now all of a sudden become manure management experts. So you have to figure out what to do with all the poo. We'll talk a bit more about biosecurity here in just a second. And the last thing that the bulletin goes into a little more depth on each of these topics, but the last thing that I like to share with people who are starting the learning curve of having livestock, if you've never had livestock before, is really try to utilize your resources that are available to you. So the veterinarian will be a great resource. Hopefully you're not doing something so specialized that you work yourself into a corner there. Extension, always, we're happy to help. It's really great to just meet your neighbors, figure out what they're doing and how. A lot of times we're all faking it till we make it, right? So we're doing the best we can. We're watching over the fence to see what's going on over there, to see how they're doing it. I would give you some caution about resources that you can find online. There are a lot of people who consider themselves to be experts and a lot of people that have great expertise and experience. I will let you in on my extension educator all-time secret, which is how to online search effectively. So if you want to just come up with sources in your search, say whatever your favorite search engine is, you go to that search engine and you type in how to raise Cooney pigs, or Cooney pig resources, or mini donkey resources, mini donkey tips and tricks. If you add to the end that right there in quotes, this is site:/edu, you'll only get results in your search that are posted on websites that have edu at the end of the web address. And the edu at the end of the web address designates that website is from an educational institution. So all of the extension sites in the United States, their websites end with .edu. So you can search for stuff that just comes from university sites. And extension, we pride ourselves in being research-based and doing safe and effective things. So that can be really helpful in your searching. And it same goes with if you want government sites, or so .gov is the government site. So you would do site:/gov, site:/org is for organizations and nonprofits and non-government organizations. So it changes your results when you try to specialize your search. So that can be really helpful for you to get safe and non-biased information. And I've just encouraged you to never stop learning, taking classes like this, getting to know other people, getting in the loop of educational opportunities that are happening in your area is a great way to kind of bridge the learning curve or climb the steep learning curve that is animal ownership. Any questions about basic animal husbandry before I jump into my last short little topic about biosecurity? It's a really quiet group. I hope you're enjoying my talking head. Okay, pull up this last one. I like to call this presentation "Where Have Your Boots Been Today?" Because it's really kind of fascinating to think about, and I think we're all much more aware in the last, how long has it been now? 18 months? Have we survived the pandemic for that long? I think we're so much more aware now of the germs and the oh, it's telling me my sharing is unable to do that. Let me try again. I think we're much more aware of biosecurity. I was in a classroom today with 5th graders, and I hadn't been in a school in a while. And at the end of class, this cute little kid walked up and he was like, "Can I give you a hug?" And I'm like, "I just met you 20 minutes ago, young man. And can you give me a hug? Do I want you to give me a hug?" Like, it took me a second. I felt bad that I hesitated because I love kids. Of course, I'll give you a hug. But then I was like, whew, what germs are you passing on to me, kiddo? So I want you to think for just a second of what have you touched today? I touched a 5th grader. I also touched my dog. Put in the chat, what have you touched today? I touched my chickens, cat, doorknobs at my office, my lunch. I washed my hands several times, but it's just kind of eye-opening, right? To be like, wow, where have I been today? Where have my boots been? What have I walked in? And I have all the things in place to make this into a fun little educational video about thinking about where you've been. And when you're on a small acreage property, you might experience all kinds of things. There's mud and sand and dirt and grass and just thinking about under your feet. But I see that you're putting stuff in the chat. Potty training a toddler. Boy. Kids, doors, chickens, goats. Hay equipment, shopping cart, food. Yeah, so many things. And things that we don't even think about. I think we're more aware maybe a little bit now, but stuff we don't think about. But the biosecurity conversation is mostly about poop. And like I've taught this class a few times where I have little the poop emoji, right? So they make those in little pillows, and I would like throw them at people and be like, "You are contaminated, you're contaminated, you're contaminated. And what are you gonna do about it?" And so poop is everywhere. It's kind of sad. So this slide is an excerpt from a class that I was part of for a while, teaching food safety to produce farmers. And there's some new federal regulation. Well, it's not super new now. It's been out for 4 or 5 years, but the Food Safety Modernization Act that is all about how produce farmers have to up their game to keep people from getting sick from eating raw fruits and vegetables. And so this chart, it is a few years old, but it's just kind of a snapshot in time, talking about how outbreaks of different things. So different bacteria, there were outbreaks based on bacteria, parasites, and viruses, and how many people were affected by these outbreaks. So these are like the things that you see in the news. There's been several lettuce ones. There's been some tomato ones, there's been spinach ones. So these are the things that that show up in the news of all these people are getting sick. So many people are dying because of foodborne illness. And what's interesting to me is that the numbers actually seem kind of low. But the reason I think the numbers are low is, how many of us have had a food-related illness? Like we ate something bad and we spent an afternoon miserable about it, or even 2 or 3 days or whatever it might be, and we didn't ever report it. So I want you to think about that. Like, so the numbers might not be reflective of the actual incident because reporting numbers are fairly low. Who really wants to go tell somebody publicly, oh, by the way, I spent the afternoon and this is what I did, so that's, I think, reflective of how the numbers are. We won't spend a lot of time going into the different things, but thinking about what's causing this. So we're talking about E. coli, salmonella, listeria, hepatitis A, norovirus, giardia. There's some pretty nasty bacteria, parasitic and viral things that can make us sick in our food. And so how do they get there? And where are they coming from? What is it? If they all come from poop, how does poop get in my food? I mean, how rude, right? And so I want to talk about these different avenues that poop's getting in our food. So humans, and this is really fascinating. So I don't know if it's fascinating. There are people, I hope we're better about it now, but hand washing isn't something that all people know how to do very well. And there's some cultures in the world and places in the world where plumbing isn't very common. And so people, in some cultures, in some places, it's not commonplace to flush a toilet or wash your hands or use clean towels, or all of those things could be something that not everybody knows how to do, just based on their culture or based on where they're from. And so this effort in the produce safety training is training people about proper hand washing, training people about when you use the bathroom, you have to flush it, when you or how to handle the doorknobs with the paper towels, or turn off the faucet with your arm, or use, all of those things. And or that when you use the bathroom, you don't wipe and throw your used toilet paper on the ground next to the potty. All those things. Isn't that lovely? I hope you all had dinner already. Sorry. We'll move away from the humans and maybe it won't be so uncomfortable. So thinking about fresh fruits and vegetables. So fresh fruits and vegetables don't go through a sanitation point necessarily. You're not cooking them. You're not boiling them. You're not cleaning. You want to clean them, but they're not being cooked, and that's not killing the bacteria. And so it's super important, more important than anything, that we try to keep our fresh fruits and vegetables free of these contaminants. So humans, if we're not washing our hands, if we're sick, if we're, if we pack my cat around, and then I go out and I pick food in the orchard and I sell it to my neighbors at the farm stand. So what was my cat carrying that is now on my clothes that I maybe brushed off in the orchard, or over my box of apples I picked? So it can be on my gloves, it can be on my boots, it can be on my clothes, it can be on my hands. If I'm sick and I cough or I sneeze, all those things, humans are spreading it around. Animals, so a lot of time domestic animals are a big culprit. They are reservoirs for our viruses and illnesses. So they might carry around things that we're shedding, and then they just deposit it wherever they go, right? If anybody's owned a cat, you just can't control them. So they go where they go. And they live close enough to us that they can carry, shed, and spread human pathogens. And wildlife, thinking about wildlife coming into our fresh fruits and vegetable areas, they're we don't always know that they were there. We don't, we might see the evidence that they were there, but what did they do while they were in and around our food? So thinking about if you have fresh fruits and vegetables, you have an orchard, you have things on your property, my advice is don't pick poop. And what I mean by that is take a visual assessment of your product before you're going to harvest it. And if there's areas that have been impacted by some animal or human source of feces, don't touch it. Just let it go. Because if you think about it, you pick the apple off the tree that the bird pooped on, which that one's really hard, right? So birds are pesky in an orchard. We know that. But do your best to not. So if you pick the apple with the poop on it and you put that apple in the box, that apple's now touching clean apples. Your hand now has poop on it. You get it on the rung of the ladder. You get it on the next fruit. You get it on, it just goes on and on and on and on. If you're really OCD about germs, I'm sorry for freaking you out. So soil is the next one. This goes back to composting. So thinking about when you are composting raw manure, when you put raw manure onto because there's great nutrients in raw manure, right? So we want that. We want to incorporate that. We don't want to waste it. But it also, if treated incorrectly, can be a contaminant. So we want to make sure that our composting process has had the time it needs to take care of any of those nasty bacteria that might be in that raw manure. And you're not going to clean out the dairy barn and then go spread it on your garden the day before it's time to pick the peppers, right? So there's some time involved. If you're going to fertilize with raw manure, or if you're going to fertilize with even aged manure, do it in a time frame where it's not going to impact the stuff that you're picking right the next day, or even soon after. Give it that time to soak into the soil. That's where you want it. Put it on the soil before you plant your plants, even better. Water is the next one. It's actually a pretty good culprit for passing around pathogens, right? It's a good conductor. And in our large scale fruit and vegetable production farms, they're being required to test their water frequently, which is it's costly and it's cumbersome, it's labor intensive, and bless the farmers of the world for putting up with all the government regulations that they have to do to keep us from getting sick. But it's really important that you know what's in your water before you use it to drink in your house and water your veggies, because it can impact whether you get sick from some of these contaminants. And there's also a good conversation to be had in rural areas about what is your water source? Is it a deep well? Is it river water that's been treated? Is it a surface level well that's just kind of surface water that's just gone through 10, 20 feet of percolation through the soil? So you really want to know where your water is coming from and have it tested. Buildings, equipment and tools, it's kind of related to, humans impact buildings, tools, and equipment, right? So we're using the tools. The shovel you use to pick up the dog manure in the yard, are you harvesting your onions with the garden in the afternoon? I hope not. Say you're driving your tractor through a muddy place, is it flipping up mud from the water running off of the cattle pen? Is it flipping that mud up on the pumpkins that you just harvested in the back of the tractor? Thinking about that cross-contamination of buildings, tools, and equipment is really important. And it's even pathogens that aren't like public health significance, like human health significance. It also goes to if you have a disease in your tree and you cut off the diseased part, you could be spreading that disease to your healthy parts of your tree by not cleaning your tools. So it's something to think about that way too. I'll just touch on this briefly about the difference between cleaning and sanitizing. I think this is one of the things that we've also kind of been inundated with during COVID time, the difference between cleaning and sanitizing. And you want to think about how do you know if something's not clean? There's a we used to give an example of a biofilm, right? So like when you wake up in the morning and your mouth is all yucky from sleep, that's a biofilm. You have a biofilm on your teeth. Well, you can take a drink of water and it might release that film a little bit, but until you actually get something in there that's gonna break up that film, that you're not really cleaning it. So you're not able to get it fully clean. So cleaning, you want to remove the dirt or soil from the surface, which you might have to use a detergent to do that. And then after a surface is clean, then you can sanitize it. So it's really important that you think about what surfaces you're using. That's why a lot of times stainless steel surfaces are what are required in test kitchens or restaurant kitchens where food is being prepared, or in pack houses where a lot of produce is being handled. A lot of the old pack houses had wood surfaces, and wood is, notorious for germs and things getting stuck down in the pores of that wood. And so it's really difficult to sanitize, really difficult to keep clean. And so farms are being asked to do some pretty incredible things to try to keep us safe, keep our food safe. And thank goodness for the farmers of the world that are doing that. Just kind of to wrap up here about biosecurity, that's most often the term that we're using, and I liked this acronym for biosecurity handout about it that I had Tyanne send out, that keeping things clean, even going back to owning animals. If your animal area isn't clean, then it'll be a lot easier for there to be a harboring of these pathogens. So if you never take care of the manure in your animal's pen, it's going to be difficult for them to stay healthy, and it will also impact how we are able to stay healthy. Another part of biosecurity with animals or just on your property is knowing the history. So if you're buying new animals, where did they come from? Have they had vaccinations? Have they been around anything that's any kind of situation that would make them really ill, or they might be carrying something that make your animals ill? So being able to, leading into the next one, if you're bringing new animals onto your property, you want to keep them isolated from any of your other animals for up to 2 weeks, or at least 2 weeks, maybe even up to 30 days, so that any kind of illness that pops up, you can handle without it spreading across your whole herd inadvertently. And then the P in CHIP is proper animal management practices. So observing your animals for sickness, those things that we already kind of talked about. All of that can be part of biosecurity. And it really comes down to, so what? All of these things that we talked about today, like if you want to be a niche market, so you're going to get a really creative type of animal on your property, or your neighbors are doing these things, why are they doing that? And then in your practices that you're using to care for your animals, like what is it that, how does that play in? And then the whole idea of biosecurity, keeping people safe, keeping yourself safe, public perception, and the interaction of these three things. It's all can all play together, right? So you want to be able to be prepared in a situation. If your animal's super thin and the animal control guy comes out, do you automatically just get upset, or do you take the time to educate, or you take the time to learn? If somebody is accusing you of something, if you're new to this and you didn't know, do you get upset, or do you take the time to learn and be humble and figure out what you can do to do better by your animals, do better by your neighbors, do better by yourself, in your own carrying things forward of, you want to be proud of the products that you raise, or you want to be, I don't think anybody, I'm a strong believer that people have good intentions. And so I don't think anybody sets out, at least initially, to do harm to the world around us, but at least not very many people do, in my belief. So this is just kind of a representation to tie this all together about how, if you're getting into livestock yourself, or you're living around people that have livestock, that there's a bigger picture sometimes that we might not understand, and there's always an opportunity to learn and to make ourselves better in that way. And that's the message I'll leave you with. Wherever your boot's been today, it's an opportunity to be grateful for the beautiful world we live in and the opportunities that we get to do all that we get to do in this beautiful Idaho, where we are. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And that concludes what I have to share with you tonight. Is there any questions that I can answer that any of that information might have brought up for you? Dang. You've been the most respectful audience I've ever had. Better than the fifth graders today.
Everyone's quiet.
Very quiet.
Okay.
Well, thanks for having me, Tyanne.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my topic, which is animal byproducts. If you could nod your head, if you can see my slides. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make them larger. Okay. I have to change the view just a little bit here. So animal byproducts are basically other uses of livestock besides the typical use, which is for meat, fiber, or milk. Okay, and again, I said my name is Tyanne. This is all my contact information. So a byproduct, again, is parts of the animal not used for milk or meat, and that also includes fiber in many cases as well. So a byproduct could include blood, organs, hide, fat, bone, other parts that we use to create different things every day. Farmers and ranchers are, I believe, the epitome of reduce, reuse, and recycle. I think that we've really figured out how to use our food chain effectively to reduce the amount of animal waste by greatly is what it could compare to be, as you'll see in these slides. So how much of an animal is really used for meat? If you're looking at a typical beef cow, you could get approximately 70% meat. However, if we add meat and the byproducts that we get from using the other parts of the cow, we use approximately 99% of the entire animal. So if we've got 1,000-pound steer, we've only got about 10 pounds of waste. And a pig, we use 72% of its, you can expect 72% of a pig to be meat. And we use nearly 100% of a pig for meat and byproduct. Lamb, you can expect 50% of a lamb to be meat. And then after that, it becomes difficult to determine how much of byproduct is used because of the different wools out there and whether wool is being used or not. With chickens, I wanted to add a smaller livestock in here. 62% of a chicken will be meat. 30% of that will be from the breast, and 100% of the animal will be used as meat or a byproduct used for a different item. And we're going to talk about those different items here in a moment. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share a video. Let me It's been a moment since I've done this. Go back one here. Stop share, and then let me go on into the video here. Are you able to, if you nod, if you're able to see the YouTube video of the cow? Nope. Okay, that's what I was afraid of. So let me, there it is. I'm using a different computer today than I'm used to using. So it's kind of got me thrown for a loop. So here we go. If there's an issue, Rebecca, go ahead and give me a hand signal. If there's an issue when I push play, because you're the only one I can see here. Okay.
Cattle, better known to most as sirloin, brisket, T-bone, short rib, or simply beef. But what you see in the meat aisle is only part of the animal. For perspective, about 60% is harvested for food. The other 40% ends up in places like lipstick and jet fuel. Let's start with one of the most ubiquitous parts, the fat. The fat that doesn't end up at the butcher's is rendered into a product called tallow. Fatty acids in the tallow give it a slick, oily consistency, which adds to the texture in some body creams, cosmetics, soaps, and toothpaste. They're also a lubricant in antifreeze, hydraulic brake fluids, and jet engines, and are even being tested as a biofuel for planes in the US Air Force. But powering planes is just the beginning. We also rely on cattle for certain life-saving medicines like insulin. Bovine insulin is nearly identical to humans. So the cow pancreas is often used to make insulin injections for diabetics. Likewise, the adrenal glands are used in certain steroid drugs. Cartilage helps make medicine for people who suffer from osteoarthritis, and the lungs are used in blood thinners like heparin. Medicine aside, we even use cattle leftovers in plastic surgery. Collagen from the hide is purified and injected into the face for a younger look. But it turns out that plastic surgery isn't the most common use for collagen. That title goes to gelatin, which is made from boiling cow bones and hide. Gelatin gives that distinctive gummy texture to foods like certain marshmallows, caramels, gummies, and jams. There are more than 727,000 beef farms in the US that slaughter roughly 30 million cattle each year. While we usually think about the meat that ends up on the grill, the parts we ignore are present throughout our everyday lives.
Okay, so
Fresh roses are the main
Oh.
ingredient for this ancient way of making
see if
perfume.
I can get it to
The
stop.
tradition is thousands of years old, and this small city in India is one of the
Sharing
only
again.
places that still makes it this way. One batch can take weeks or even months to prepare. The result is 100%
See, this is what
pure
happened when you
perfume,
use a new
also called
computer.
attar, the Arabic word for fragrance. But what makes the attar so special is also what is leading to its demise. The time-consuming process is hard to sustain.
There we go. We'll go ahead and get rid of that. Sorry about that. That one that was coming up is a really interesting video as well, but we'll wait for that for another day to talk about that. Was there anything in the chat that you would like to add that you were surprised to see as a byproduct? Nobody's, yeah, gummy bears. Yep. One of my favorite ones to share with people is refined sugar has an animal byproduct in it. They use charcoal from burning the bones in order to get the white to get the remaining color out of sugar to make it a refined white sugar. And so it's a bone charcoal that's used. That usually, basically, it's almost impossible to be vegan. Okay, are you able to see my slide, Rebecca? No, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, let me stop share and read and try it again here.
Like, I love gummy bears, but that just freaks me out a little bit, just to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yep. Are you able to see it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're going to go through some of these other products. So animal ingredients that are often found in our foods are carmine, casein, collagen. Collagen is basically the newest fad to put in your food as a beauty treatment. You can put collagen in your smoothies, and you can buy pure beef collagen in a powdered form. Cholesterol, confectioner's glaze, like we talked about with sugar. Gelatin's in just about anything. Most candies have gelatin in them. You know, everything from Jell-O itself to marshmallows, which are basically Jell-O or pure gelatin and sugar mixed together. Ghee, which is a refined butter, and it's kind of hard to tell whether ghee is really a byproduct or a product because it is actually a dairy product. Glycerin, isinglass, which I haven't been able to figure out exactly what that is. I know it's a part of actual of making glass, glassware, things like that. Lard, lipase, retinol. We all use you see retinol creams all the time. Shellac, that's what we put on our walls. Tallow is a very common in a lot of different things. Whey is a byproduct of the dairy rennet. And then this added to it as well is they added fish oil as a byproduct of the fish industry and in farming fish. Some of the different things we see in our cosmetics here are stearic acid. You'll see in a lot of different items. If you look down on the third one, stearic acid's in a lot of foods as well. If you look on the back of your cake mix, you'll find stearic acid. If you look on the back of your pasta, you'll often find stearic acid as well. Carmine shows up again. Carmine is actually not a byproduct of livestock, but it is a beetle that is ground up and used as the red color food dye and the red color used in our cosmetics as well. Some of the other things that you'll see in byproducts of animals here, we've got lanolin. Lanolin comes from sheep. Snails are being used in cosmetics now. The goo that comes from snails, that byproduct of the slime that they produce, has become a beauty product. Wax, of course, beeswax, keratin, And then bee pollen. Bee pollen is being used in foods and cosmetics. Some of the different fibers, the skin, fiber, and feathers that we'll see in clothing that are byproducts of livestock. Cashmere is one of those that's an in-between, because cashmere goats are raised for their cashmere wool, which is actually more of a cashmere hair. And that's really what they're raised for. They're not really raised so much for meat as they are specifically for their cashmere hair. Down, from the down of ducks and geese, feathers. There's actually feather feed that I don't know if you can still get it or not. I believe they put it in fish food is a feather feed, and it's ground up feathers. Fur, of course, we don't see that so much. Animals being raised specifically for their fur, but of course the leather industry and is thriving, and it is a byproduct of the cow or the excuse me, or of any of the other livestock, different leathers out there. There used to be an alligator farm in southern Idaho. I believe they're shut down, and they raised alligators to make turn them into food. There was a restaurant that used to sell alligator meat on their menu nearby, but then also they would dye and treat the alligator leather, and so that's where you'd get your gator boots from. Going on a field trip there was one of the creepier things I've ever done. You'll walk into a large Kwanzaa hut. It almost looks like a potato storage hut, real long, with a dome. And you're walking on a platform above very, very stinky, humid, hot water. And there's very little light in there, but what you are seeing is the shining of the eyes of the alligators looking up at you. And that was for the smaller alligators would live in there until they were about 3 or 4. Then they'd be moved outside, where they were raised in an outside enclosure. Until they were, I believe, around 6 to 8 feet long before they were killed for their leather. So silkworms, really, you can't really call a silkworm a byproduct, the silk a byproduct, but it does come as a main product using the silkworm. Suede, wool, seashells. In medicines, thyroid medications, like we saw in that video, Rebecca had a great way of being able to tell if your source that you're finding on the internet is truly reliable by the site :edu. Insider Tech, if you look at the video I showed you, Tech Insider does the same thing. If you look at their excuse me, their references, you'll see a lot of edu sites in there, and so that's why I used them as a great short video to show you. You'll see that the capsule portion that makes pills easier to swallow is made out of a gelatin. Pregnant mare urine is about the most expensive, one of the most expensive liquids by the pound or by the gallon that you can purchase. Horseshoe crab blood is about the second most expensive. And scorpion venom is the most expensive by the gallon that you can purchase of an animal byproduct. Horseshoe crab blood is used in human medicine, medical research all the time. If you get a chance, I won't show these videos today, but I will go ahead and add them to the Facebook site for you to watch. They're very, very interesting, watching how they get both of these items as a byproduct of both of these animals and what they're used for. Okay, and that. Okay, so one of the handouts that we talked about, or that I emailed to you, there was 3 of them. One was called Everything But the Ba, Everything But the Moo, and Everything But the Oink. And we're going to talk about a few of the things that are on those items. And I want you to reflect on if you use these byproducts on a regular basis, if you use them daily. We need to know, reflect on why do we need to be knowledgeable about why we need these byproducts in the first place? What would happen to society if we didn't have these byproducts? And is there items that you didn't know that you used on a regular basis that were byproducts? So I'm going to go through a couple of Everything But the Ba of the lamb, and we're going to start with artist brushes, sports equipment, fabrics, the rouge base in your cosmetics, asphalt binder, ointment base in cosmetics and in medicines, tennis balls, felt, carpet, footwear, baseballs. Look up how many yards of wool yarn are in a baseball, and you will be amazed at how much wool is used on a baseball field on any given spring. Upholstery, chewing gum comes from the fats and fatty acids of lambs. Paint, explosives, solvents. From the intestines, we get instrument strings, surgical sutures, tennis racket strings. And from the manure, we get many of the different major, sorry, I'm having a moment here. Some of the many different things that are needed in order to raise our food and fields, including nitrogen fertilizer, potash, and phosphorus. Everything But the Moo. From the brain of a cow, you'll get anti-aging cream medicines. Yes, you will. From the blood, and that's where we're getting that stearic acid from that you'll see is in pasta, cake mixes, dyes and inks, adhesives, medicines, laboratory research materials. From the bones, like we talked about before, the refined sugar, the charcoal, the fertilizer, and the glass. From the hair, we get air filters, brushes, felt, insulation. Just like hair and fur is the best insulator for an animal, it is also a great insulator for use in buildings and other industrial uses of insulation. plaster and textiles as well. Internal organs will give us hormones, enzymes, vitamins, and other medical materials. From the fat of a cow, it goes on forever. And that's where they rendered out the tallow that we saw in the Tech Insider. And it goes on as a long list of probably 50 items, including everything from antifreeze to the rubber from the tires on your vehicle, waterproofing agents, crayons, pet food, perfume, deodorant, fabric softener, chalk, cement, medicines again. From the skin, one of the main forms of gelatin comes from the skin and the hooves and the horns of cows is the gelatin. We also get flavorings. You know, if you wonder where that, what do they call it? The beef flavorings and things like that that you would get in your, like cups of soup and things like that, or your chicken or whatever. That powder can come from the skin. Candies and confectionaries come from the skin through the gelatin. Hooves and horns, you'll get plant food, lamination, plywood, shampoo and conditioner. Pigs are one of the more interesting ones because pigs are so uniquely similar to humans that they really have so many medicinal uses in their byproducts for us. Their blood makes up medicines for us. Their brain also creates other medicines, cholesterol, medications. Their internal organs, insulin, thyroid medication, surgical sutures, heart valves. Their skin, of course, we get pig skin, we get the footballs, we get drum heads, we get from their bones, we get glue and buttons and bone china. If you've ever seen in your grandparents' cabinets, bone china, that is actually made from bone. It used to be that phonograph records and that, an actual film, like 35 millimeter film from a camera, was also a byproduct from pigs. So I see a few in the chat here. Yeah, Erin, you are right. Collagen powder is extremely popular for weight loss right now. I have tried it just to see what it was like, and it just tastes like just a flavorless powder. You put in water and mix it up in a shake. Some people swear by it. I was hoping it would add more calories to more protein to what I was eating, but there actually is no protein in that collagen. The fly fishing flies, she sells duck feathers to hobby fly tires, absolutely. Rebecca says it's crazy incredible to think of all these uses and how scientists are smart to come up with all of these things. So could you imagine if we were to lose any of these species of livestock, what it could do to our industries around the world? It would truly change how we live. Rachel says beef collagen does have protein in it. And you're right, Rachel, it does. The one that I purchased did not have enough in it to have the effect I wanted. It wasn't going to be a substitute for a protein powder is what I was looking for when I purchased it. But But you can get the niche market of it. You can get grass-fed only organic beef collagen for a higher price on Amazon than regular beef collagen. So they've found the niche market even in the byproducts. It's truly almost impossible to be vegan in our lifestyles that we have in the United States, and truly in other places as well. Any country that has industry, it's practically impossible to actually be truly vegan. So like I'd already asked this before, what would happen if the byproducts were not available anymore? Truly, what would happen to the medical field and our research into medicines and into cures of different diseases out there? And then I also ask, what are some other settings where byproducts are generated and put to good use, or put to good use on this one? And settings where byproducts are generated and put to good use is if you go to YouTube, I will look it up and put it on Facebook, but there is a longer video. It's actually, if you know who Mike Rowe is from Dirty Jobs, he goes to a pig farm near Las Vegas, and all of the waste from the buffets were being shipped to this pig farm and fed to the pigs, so that none of that was actually going to waste. Now, if you think about why pork tastes different from the grocery store as compared to pork that's been raised by some of our 4-H and FFA kids that have kept them on a diet that does not include slop, it's amazing the taste difference, I believe. We discourage our kids from actually slopping their pigs. And if they do slop, we encourage it to only be common fruits and vegetables, such as watermelon rinds, your carrot peelings, things like that. Pigs are truly omnivores. However, if you're feeding an omnivore diet to a pig, you need to make sure that the meat that's being fed to the pig is cooked. And we teach our youth that we can't guarantee that that meat has been cooked properly when you're slopping an animal. So, and with that, that is the end of my presentation. This is a presentation that I give to people of all ages, from kindergartners to adults. I've given it to many different groups, and they're always just so taken aback by what we truly do with byproducts. Humans are not able to digest grass, and grass is basically the #2 natural resource that we have in the world. #1 being water, #2 being grass. We can't digest grass. However, we can raise livestock that digests grass, that is then able to be turned into all these other different uses. And as I said before, the farmer and rancher has really became the true reducer, reuser, and recycler that we're all taught in school to become better at. So with that, does anyone have any questions before I go on? Okay. I'm gonna stop share here for a minute. And I'm going to pull up another screen here. In your, we talked earlier about teaching evaluations. Both Rebecca and I are getting to the end of our teaching year, which means that we need to have teaching evaluations in, and we need to have so many in by the end of the month. So that's why we're really asking for these teaching evaluations to be done. It would really help us out for every person that's watched this. Also, when I put it out onto YouTube, I will share a link and you'll be able to share it with a friend or your partner, your family. And if they watch it, if they would please jump on there and do the same participant extension and teaching evaluation. I will pull it up on the screen so you can see what it looks like. Oh, it disappeared. Okay, you're able to see it there? Okay. So you'll put in today's date, you'll put in either Rebecca or I's name, the presentation title, even if it's just a shortened version of it, and then our supervisor's email I've also added here into the slide that I'm going to show you. And then as you go down, your name is optional. You can show how you actually went to the class, whether it was on Zoom or we're here in person. And then asks different questions, whether you strongly agree to strongly disagree on different parts of the programming. And it really helps us out here. So I will go ahead and move to the next slide. And for Rebecca's, this is what it will look like. Even if you just put livestock ownership, that's enough.
We're not seeing your slide thing.
Oh, darn it. Okay, let's try that again. So you know where it says the technology part there, you saw if they had effective use of technology. Clearly, I am having some glitches today. So are you able to see that now? Okay, so this is what you would put to start with Rebecca's. Like, your name is absolutely optional. It goes in, you don't add your email. It's submitted online only. So that's what hers would look like. And then that's what mine would look like. So the supervisor's email is at southerndist@uidaho.edu. The email that I sent you to give you the link to this Zoom at the very bottom gives you all this information plus the link to go to do this evaluation for both of us. So please don't do them together as if we had taught together. Do them as two separate presentations. Would be greatly appreciated. And I know I spent a lot of time on that, but you know, it's something that's really important to us because Rebecca, how many years have you been in extension now or a part of extension?
Total, maybe 12.
12 years, yep. And I'm hitting 10 years. And so these evaluations make a big difference on how we change what we do and modify our teaching styles. So with that, does anyone have any other questions that I can answer for you? Rachel shaking her head no, because she's the only one I can see besides Karen who's saying no. I'm gonna quickly pull up what next. We actually are not doing one next Tuesday, the 5th. Our next one will be October 12th. Let me quickly pull up that, grab my piece of paper and tell you what the main topic's gonna be on that one. It's all on Facebook as well, what each topic is. So October 12th will be bees and pollinators, and that's with an entomologist, Brad Stokes out of Elmore County. He's excellent if you want to talk about horticulture, if you want to talk about pests, if you want to talk about honeybees and good insects, the happy insects that we like, or the bad insects we're trying to get rid of. He's a great one to talk to, and he does love his bugs. Yes, he does. And it's so nice to have someone in the area that now when bugs are sent to us, as I have right here on my desk, some larvae that was brought into my office a week ago, I'm able to send it to someone to look at with a microscope. So that's how we use him. And then October 19th will be with Dave Harold, and we'll be talking about weeds and good grasses as well, and good plants. And then we'll also be talking about defensible space around your home regarding wildfires. And this will be a field trip one, so I won't actually be in the office to do this one. So Karen, I may send you with a computer to watch that one that week. And it's because we're going to go to someone's private home and film as we talk and show you the defensible spaces that this man's created around his home. It's truly amazing what he's done, and he didn't even know he was doing it. So, and then our last one will be with Carrie Boone on October 26th. She'll be talking about water and water rights, and how just because water is running through your property doesn't necessarily make it your water, and why that is such a confusing concept and difficult concept for a lot of us to understand, because I certainly still don't quite understand how water rights truly work yet either. And it's been 10 years on the job and I still have to try to figure it out. So those are the main speakers for the next 4. And I will be speaking on different topics as well that will correspond with their topic. So there'll be at least 2 speakers for every session. So with that, it is exactly 9 p.m. We got done just right on time. So if you have anything that you'd like to share with us, turn on your cameras, turn on your audio. I really appreciate Deidre and Aaron and Chad and Amber and Rachel and Karen for being here. I know I made a few last minute calls to make sure that we had plenty of people today in order to put this on, because we didn't want to do this to a group of 2 isn't quite as much fun as a group of 9. So thank you so much for being willing to jump on here and join us today. So with that, I will hopefully see you on October 12th. So good night, everybody.